It's April 2020. COVID lockdown is in full effect, and your online classes are playing quietly in the background. Your buddy hit you up to play some Minecraft, so you're neglecting your schoolwork and spending some quality time. You do this every day. There's nothing else to do. Life becomes a simulation where you aren't allowed to leave your house or see your friends, and your only source of escape is this game from your childhood which you're revisiting for the first time in years. If this sounds like a familiar story to you, I'm not surprised. Be it Fortnite or Call of Duty or any number of other games you might have played, lockdown was a moment in our lives where escapism and gaming was a really good option, where the world was on pause and it seemed like a free pass to leave it behind for a while. When the challenges of life feel too overwhelming and you have the option to disconnect from them in some way, escapism becomes a very natural reaction. When your future seems bleak, your present monotonous, and your life absent of purpose or meaning, wasting away in a fictional world doesn't sound so bad. Now don't get me wrong, I love games. Like any other work of art, I think there is an intrinsic beauty and utility and potential that games have. I don't think they're inherently wrong, and I don't think escapism itself is always the worst thing in the world. But games are different from movies, or television, or books. Games have an advantage that can be dangerous if not kept in line. You see, in a book you can imagine, put yourself in the world of the story and its characters. In a show, you can empathize with the characters, their world, and their journeys. You can almost swear you've spent time in those places found throughout. But the advantage with games, the difference in function, is freedom. The freedom to build a Minecraft world exactly how you imagined it. The freedom to travel and explore and go anywhere you can see ahead of you. No limitations, no inconsistencies. While you can spend a while reading a book or watching a show, with a game you really could spend a lifetime there. In a single world, on a single save file. Nobody does, and there would obviously come a point where you'd run out of content, but fiction and media are an imitation of life, created to replicate some aspect of the human experience, to teach, inspire, entertain, or educate. Every form of art has its own strengths and weaknesses, things it does best and things that it struggles with. What games have that movies don't, that books don't, is freedom. The freedom to do what you want. To actually influence and change things, to enact your will onto a story or world completely separate from our own. This freedom is powerful, and depending on the game, can be utilized in a way that immerses someone entirely, helps them to escape and forget about their own world, their own problems, and their own responsibilities. At times in my life, I feel like I was more a part of Skyrim, or Fallout, or Minecraft than the real world. I spent more time logged in role-playing a character than being myself. In moderation, this escapism can be therapeutic and beneficial. It can help you look at your life from a different perspective, as if you can see things more impartially because you've lived another life as another person in another world. But freedom in games can be a slippery slope. It can be a powerful escape, an appealing alternative, a realistic simulation. For the average healthy person, it never goes too far. It never takes this turn for the worse. But for some people, consumed with hopelessness or the feeling of meaninglessness, or a crippling anxiety towards the world, games can become a cage they end up giving their lives to, the years passing online with nothing to show for that time spent on Earth. I think in the world today there's an often overlooked crisis of loneliness and meaninglessness for young people. Across the world in general, and even at home for me in the US, birth rates are declining, anxiety and depression are on the rise, and the quest for personal fulfillment and validation has become harder than ever. Young people today are struggling in a way they never quite have, and are looking towards solutions which have never been available till now. You see, throughout human history, young people have always struggled, always been through hardship. The struggles of today are not unique in that they exist, but they are unique in that they revolve around different problems with different solutions than issues of the past. Given the varied complexity of our species' histories, cultures, societies, and peoples groups, I obviously can't discuss every significant problem. But think for a moment about war. Any war will do because this scenario is common and symptomatic. But imagine that you were a French teenager in the year 1793. The revolution has just kicked off, France is at war with Austria, and the first coalition has begun. Every young, unmarried man, ages 18 to 25, is drafted into the military. It's the first modern example of total war, where an entire society is mobilized for a national cause. I myself am 19. Living a relatively peaceful, comfortable life in the United States of America. If I were alive in France at that time, I would be going off to war, sent to a battlefield somewhere to fight and die for my country. There is nothing in my life nearly as awful or debilitating as the horror of war. Some would say there is no reason at all why a modern teenager or young adult should complain or be depressed, because things on average are so much better than they have been for most of our history. But you see, when you think about why escapism is a thing, why people turn to games and media as a distraction from the challenges of life, it's easy to call people weak or soft or say that history shows us how much worse things could be, but I think that's a bit dismissive and fails to acknowledge the uniqueness of modern problems. The problems our youth will confront in the world today are often more nuanced and less existential than something like war, but they're often a different kind of problem, tied up more in the meaning and purpose which drives someone forward through challenges, rather than the context of the challenges themselves. To illustrate my point, I'd like to take a look for a moment at South Korea, and I promise all of this will start to make sense soon. If you're interested at all in global politics or social sciences, the population crisis of South Korea and Japan should be nothing new to you. For decades now, it's been observed that the South Korean birth rate is plummeting, sitting today as of September 2025 at 0.75 children born per woman per year, well below the considered necessary population replacement rate of 2.1. In other words, the population of South Korea is in massive, apocalyptic decline, and it's projected that if nothing changes by 2050, that about 40% of the Korean population will be above the age of 65. This issue is a real and existential threat to the demographics and economy of the country, and the social pressure surrounding this dismal birth rate has spawned several attempts at revitalizing population growth. Nothing has proved successful though, and the birth rate continues to fall year after year. Interestingly enough, and to wrap back around to the topic of the video, South Korean teenagers play more games on average than most of the global population does. They play mobile, web games, competitive esports like League. Unlike much of the West, South Korea has a serious esports community, with clubs and high school teams and competitions like a football or soccer game. Now, I'm not saying that esports aren't a thing in the US. I mean, obviously they're massive here and no one's denying that. It's just that something about seeing the acceptance of video games as sports in South Korea helps me understand the cultural landscape for a teenager growing up there. I saw in a League of Legends documentary on a pro South Korean League player that some kids treat becoming an esports pro as an escape, like becoming a pro athlete and pulling yourself out from poverty. His friends all took the game seriously, and he had to practice nearly every hour of the day to keep up. South Korea is a stringent society, working more hours on average than the rest of the world, with high educational standards, stagnating social mobility, and a future in population which looks dire and uncertain. In a situation like that, with no clear direction, a difficult dating market, and a work-life balance which makes your life feel like an endless slog, it's no wonder that so many youth are turning to online games as a source of escape. It's only natural, really, that when faced with meaninglessness, we default to distraction or escape. As the famous psychologist Viktor Frankl once said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Human beings are complex and deeply emotional. Our reward systems are built for certain stimuli and experiences, and living in the modern world, with this flood of overstimulation, perceived competition, declining rate of relationships and childbirth, altered expectations, with the average person having only 3 to 5 friends as compared to 5 to 10 in the 90s, I think it's only natural that we humans feel a sense of meaninglessness. As many great philosophers have said, man can endure anything but meaninglessness. When a person is meaning, they may crawl over broken glass to achieve their goal. But when you genuinely see nothing in your future but suffering, you live a sort of half-life inwardly, where you live only for the pleasure and escape of the present moment, and work and struggle only to avoid suffering and discomfort in the short term. In other words, we become nothing more than pleasure-seeking Epicurean machines, built to avoid pain and seek out comfort. In Japan, there are estimated to be around 2 million hikimoris, hermits who lock themselves up in their apartments or homes and rarely leave, living their lives chronically online, part of the matrix, with little to no connection to the outside world. These people are often shunned and misunderstood, but considering what a large and growing percentage of the population they are in Japan, we must begin at some point to examine why they exist and what can be done about it. I've already explained in exhausting detail why I think the link between escapism and gaming is so natural and intuitive, and why I also believe it's a symptom of a much greater cause. Perhaps there's no easy way to change the state of the world, or to imbue people with a sense of purpose which might help them confront the trials of life, but for anyone watching this video, I believe we can start, each of us in our own way, to subtly change the world. It begins with the individual, the young man or woman in modern times. It begins with us to invest in the real world, rather than escapism and gaming. It begins with seeking real meaning and purpose instead of doing what's easier and pursuing some form of pleasure or comfort. It begins with realizing that life is in fact a gift, and it can be incredibly beautiful if you're willing to invest in seeing it that way. Life is what you make of it, and it can be cruel, heartless, and unforgiving at times. When a tragedy shakes up your center of balance, you can choose to begin seeing the world in every moment from every perspective as awful. You can begin wishing you didn't exist at all, and distract yourself from your existential dread by indulging in escapism, like I did for so long. But however much you might wish things were different, wish you didn't exist or never did, you're here now on Earth with some allotment of time before you, some potential which could in fact be meaningful if you let it be. A person needs purpose, because life can be a terribly difficult thing. If you don't have meaning, if you don't have hope, it can feel almost impossible to keep yourself moving forward in the day-to-day. I know there's nothing I can say to any of you if you're really in a dark place which will get you out of it. I know that nothing anyone can say or do for you will make a difference, but I've genuinely been there. I've genuinely suffered and been in the depths of hopelessness and despair for what felt like forever. And the craziest part is I actually managed to climb my way out. I've seen the light and I know what's out there, and so I beg you, before you return to escapism, before you let years pass without a change, look for a moment at the entire course of your life, who you are. Find what it's all about, find what fuels you, find something, anything worth pursuing. When you look at a tree, don't just call it a tree and walk past. I want you to really examine it individually, unique from the rest. I want you to look at every branch and every leaf and see how that tree is not exactly like any other in the whole entire forest. Humans are built with an inherent appreciation for the beauty and grandeur of nature. We're built with a love of art and culture and connection. However off track you feel, there's some part of you deep inside that isn't quite broken. When you learn to love yourself, accept yourself in the world, and start moving forward, you might someday be able to look at the place you were at in the depths of despair, realizing just how far you've come, and find a good enough reason to be alive, that you no longer need to escape in a world which feels less terrifying.